It began as a prank and ended in murder. Fantastic choice. I love this one.
It's trash.
Lowbrow horror.
It's for my stepdaughter.
That'll be $2.95. Thank you for shopping at B. Dalton's. And have a nice night.
Attention shoppers, the Shadyside Mall is now closed. The Shadyside Mall is now closed.
You let me violate you. You let me desecrate you. You let me be.
Welcome to the Final Girls podcast and a very special 3-part coverage of the horror event of the summer. I'm talking, of course, about the Netflix trilogy, Fear Street. My name's Anna. I'm the co-founder of the Final Girls and your podcast host. And over the next 3 bonus episodes, 3 chunky bonus episodes, join me and my special guest as we dive very deep into every single thought we had while watching the Fear Street trilogy. This first episode is going to be entirely about Fear Street 1994, which has just hit Netflix. And be warned, we don't mince around words. So if you haven't seen it yet, best go check it out and then dive deep into this episode. We will also be releasing coverage of the next 2 films in the Fear Street trilogy the Saturday after they've come out on Netflix. So do subscribe, review, rate, all that good stuff, and let us know what you think. We also have a special exclusive interview with Fear Street director Lee Janiak coming to the podcast. You'll be hearing some bits of the interview throughout the episodes, and then I'll publish the entire interview unabridged on the feed as well. So, and with that, I do hope you're ready to enjoy some good old-fashioned slasher horror as we dive deep into Fear Street 1994. Hello, Azora. Welcome back. Always a pleasure to have you on the podcast, and especially a pleasure when we get to talk about the stabby movies.
Thrilled to be here. I was so excited about any of these films, seeing any of them. So when you messaged me about it, I was like, yes. Don't even have to be persuaded. Absolutely. What do you need? Yeah. Just genuinely very excited.
So we're going to be doing something a little bit different with Fear Street because it's a very different kind of horror series, horror film, films plural, the way that it's released. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And I've had the privilege to talk to the director of all 3 films, Lee Janiak, so I'll be interspersing our conversation through the magic of editing with my conversation with Lee, just to add maybe a couple bits that we also talked about. So to begin, tell me, how do you feel about slashers and the comeback that they're making with Fear Street?
I love slasher films. I find them relaxing. I don't know what that says about me, but I find them, they're I love horror films, obviously, but slashers are like a younger sibling of horror films. They're it's, they're kind of okay to watch when you're younger. They're kind of fun. The characters are usually fun and interesting and quirky, and I really miss them actually in the horror scape. Everyone's trying to do very cerebral horrors now, and I'm I love that too, but sometimes I just want to see teenagers coming up with schemes and running, screaming, and catching killers, and sometimes I want a little bit of Scooby-Doo, just Scooby-Doo energy, where it's who's wearing the mask, and then a big reveal. I love it, and I just find them such a joy to watch, and it just feels like a very pure form of the genre. It just feels like, yeah, there isn't much you can do differently with it, but I quite like that. I quite like it's just reimaginings of essentially the same
Scooby-Doo
thing.
times has been Scooby-Doo energy. It's probably my favorite thing that you've said so far since I've known you.
Gotta love that Scooby-Doo energy. Just they really were onto something. Scooby and the gang,
I really agree with you. I have a soft spot for the slasher, and I think it can be like quite intense and like very, very scary, like some of the original 70s ones. But the slashers that I guess our generation grew up with are the slashers from the 90s, the sort of the second golden age, and I love them and I miss them because they're not scary, but they're fun, like you say. They're just really fun to watch. The kind of the biggest stakes are how intense and weird and gory are the deaths going to be, and who's behind the Scooby-Doo mask, like who's the masked killer, and trying to find out, like a sort of, 90s teen version of Agatha Christie, where we're just sort of always trying to pinpoint who the murderer is and trying to outsmart the filmmakers. So I was really excited about these films coming round, and I wanted to ask you, were you a fan of R.L. Stein books, or that kind of brand of pre-teen and then teen horror? So he was the author of Goosebumps, and then Fear Street was a much more teen-oriented series of books that he wrote.
So I devoured Goosebump books. Like, my favorite thing, to the point my teacher wrote home because I was reading too many. She said I was reading too many like Goosebump books, and then I progressed to Christopher Pike books, which is essentially the same thing. And like my teacher was like, she has to read something else. And my mom was like, well, she's reading, and she's like, I'm like burning through these books, and she's like, I was like, what do you want me to read? Like, I'm enjoying reading. These are books that we have in our library. Like, why can't I read them? But yeah, huge fan of the Goosebump books. My favorite being It Came From Beneath the Sink, which was just, I found really scary and great. There was one about a dummy as well. That was really scary.
Oh, yes. I remember that one.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't think I'm not sure if I read Fear Street. I read so many that I honestly couldn't tell you. I probably did. I don't know.
I was wondering about this when I was when the films were announced first, because similarly to you, obsessed with R.L. Stein growing up. I read all the Goosebumps books. I had all the Goosebumps VHSs. To the point where they would sell them in like the local, I guess the Spanish equivalent of an off license, where I would just go down and I would just troll through the shelf. There was an entire shelf dedicated to Goosebumps books, and I would just be like, which one don't I have yet? And I now resent my teenage asshole self who threw them all out in a fit of like, I'm too old for this shit now.
Too good for it.
Yeah, I moved on to Stephen King. I'm allowed into the adult section of the library now. Look at me.
And I think with Goose, it was really, when we were teenagers, like around in the 90s or like early 2000s, was actually like a really good time for that certain type of, there was stuff on TV like Erie, Indiana and Alex Mack, which also had those kinds of elements of creepy, I don't know, there was this like this teen horror thing that was like happening that was just like done so well, that was like not too scary but scary enough. It didn't feel like pandering. They weren't like, oh, don't scare the tiny little baby teenagers. They were like, no, they can be a bit scary, they can handle it. And it was really nice. And I feel like Goosebumps did that. All those like kind of pulpy teen books did that, where they were like, no, you can handle this. Someone died in a really bloody way. You're fine. They're going to figure it out.
And did you have any particular expectations of the Fear Street films, and specifically the 1994 one, which I think is the one that's been getting the most because it's the first one and because there's such a big 90s nostalgia thing going on? Did you have a particular expectation of what they could be or what you wanted them to be?
I guess I just kind of hoped they'd be as close to the slashers we loved as possible.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like especially the 90s one, like you said, those are the ones that really we really remember, like the second golden age of slasher films. So I was kind of like, I just really want this to be like that. I don't even care if it's like almost exactly the same. Like I'm just absolutely desperate for anything that remotely resembles it. So my expectations, I don't think I even had expectations of like, I wonder if this will be good. I think I was just like, I can't wait to watch these because I'm 100% going to watch all of them, and I'm sure they'll like satiate like my hunger for like slashers in some way. Like I just, no part of me thought I was going to be disappointed whatever happened. I was like, you'd have to like really screw this up for me to be disappointed at this point.
Let's dig into the films properly then. Your expectations were both extremely low and through the roof by the sounds of it.
Yeah. It's just fully across the spectrum.
So let's talk about, I kind of want to do it a little bit differently. So I think it's really interesting that Netflix have released the first 5 minutes of Fear Street 1994 online, which are an amazing opening scene, but also kind of after which point the film takes a turn. So I wanted to ask you kind of, what did you make of that opening, of that first scene at the mall?
I loved it. That for me was like, are you surprised that I loved it? What a surprise. So I loved it mostly because it's very much like Drew Barrymore at the beginning of Scream. It's 100% like that. Yes. They're like, here's a famous person. It's like, here's Mia Hawke. Is that her name? Right? Like Ethan Hawke. And, Maya Hawke. Yeah. So like, oh, here's this very recognizable person. And we're immediately going to murder them. And I love that. I was like, yeah, you've gone, yeah, Scream did it and it worked. Let's do it again. This is what people want.
Hello?
Hello?
Yes?
Who is this?
Who are you trying to reach?
What number is this?
What number are you trying to reach?
I don't know.
Well, I think you have the wrong number.
Do I?
It happens. Take it easy. Hello?
I'm sorry. I guess I dialed the wrong number.
Well, so why'd you dial it again?
To apologize.
You're forgiven. Bye now.
Wait. Don't hang up.
What?
I want to talk to you for a second.
They've got 900 numbers for that. See ya. Hello?
Why don't you want to talk to me?
Who is this?
You tell me your name, I'll tell you mine.
I don't think so.
What's that noise?
Popcorn.
You making popcorn?
Uh-huh.
I only eat popcorn at the movies.
Well, I'm getting ready to watch a video.
Really? What?
Oh, just some scary movie.
You like scary movies?
Uh-huh.
What's your favorite scary movie?
I don't know.
You have to have a favorite. What comes to mind?
Halloween. You know, the one with the guy in the white mask who walks around and stalks babysitters?
Yeah.
What's yours?
Guess.
Nightmare on Elm Street.
Is that the one where the guy had knives for fingers?
Yeah, Freddy Krueger.
Freddy, that's right. I like that movie. It was scary.
Wow, well, the first one was, but the rest sucked.
So, you got a boyfriend?
Why? You want to ask me out on a date?
Maybe. Do you have a boyfriend?
No.
You never told me your name.
Why do you want to know my name?
I want to know who I'm looking at.
And it is what the people want. If people are me,
What did you say?
then yes, it's exactly what I wanted. And I love it's set in a mall. Like even that is the idea of it is like, oh, I mean, there are parts of it where I was just like, in a mall, it's very empty at this time. What time of night is it? First of all, it looks like it's like midnight.
It might just be 8 p.m. It's a small town.
Right? But like, there's barely anyone still there. Then like, it feels like a big space to be trapped in, I guess, is the issue. Not the issue. I was just like, I feel like there'd be quite a few places maybe to escape to or try to escape to. And she's like, I'm going to hide behind this shelf. And just kind of wait for the killer. And even the killer, like the first killer you see, the fact that he's wearing a skull mask is like very reminiscent of like Ghostface. And then like, I love that this is like not even a nod at this point. They're like, it's slightly different than the beginning of Scream, but not really.
It's like 100% aped from Scream. And I'm saying this quite confidently because Lee Janiak said as much. Well, I was like, yes.
So,
it's that thing of like, I'm already in love with you for completely both knowingly ripping off in a really, really great way the opening to Scream, and at the same time pulling the rug from under us, because at the end of that scene, the killer is revealed. Yeah. So you're kind of like, oh, wait, but the Scooby-Doo mask has come off 5 minutes in. What the fuck's going to happen now?
Is he revealed, but he's dead. So you're just like, oh, because it's just that thing of like, you assume this is what it's going to be, right? You assume this is going to be, this town's terrorized by this one killer guy. And I wonder who it is. And it was just like, oh no, we're not doing that. But also, even the way, like, I think they call him like Skull Mask, or whatever they call him in the thing. Even the way he moves is like Ghostface. And I'm like, this is amazing that they've done it. Even the way he's running is like the same way it is in the Scream movie. And there's no other character in the film that runs like behaves like that. Like, he's really just made this person. It's just Ghostface.
Even the actor who plays him, who's like another teenager who's working at the mall late, who works in like a neon shop, I think. It's just really funny. It's very East London. I love it.
Yeah, just these very weird shops at the mall. It's like, what mall is this?
Yeah, like there's a shop not far from where I live that just sells neon signs, and now I can't look at it in the same way.
I always wonder about that shop. So I'm just like, how many people are buying neon? Like, at what rate are people buying neon signs? Yeah, even the guy, he's very much fits a and he fits a profile of like the guy who probably fancies her a bit, and you know, in the same way it's like Cindy and wait, is it Sydney or Cindy? Sydney.
Cindy is the one
Scary
in
Movie.
Scary Movie.
It even fits that whole thing of like, he kind of likes her. Maybe he's like this good guy who she's asked to drive her home. She trusts, and then he ends up like trying to kill her or killing her.
Even the way that the murder is shot is so almost exactly like the way that Drew Barrymore gets murdered in that first opening scene in Scream.
Yeah, exactly. And even the hesitation of the holding the knife up. There's that shot where before he stabs, which I'm sure if you're stabbing someone, I'm not sure you do, where you have like a pause. But I love that they had that shot even of that like really slow where she can see the knife and he like pauses before he like really slams it down into her. Yeah, incredibly violent to start with. Just a really good callback to Scream, and it just really lets you know what you're in for. It's like basically a note to go, hey guys, it's this. It's that thing that you've been missing. Here it is. It's going to be like this. And I like kind of, but like I love that. I was like, oh, they know what they're doing a slasher. We're doing a classic slasher, guys. Here it is, which I like.
We can do the formula, do it really well, make it fun again. What I kind of really liked about it from that first scene, and I was excited and stuff, but I also didn't want to expect too much. But fuck the gritty. They don't want to go gritty slasher. I'm very happy that they didn't, because like I don't really need more gritty. I don't need more gritty Batmans. I don't need more gritty slashers. I want a fun, neon, lighthearted, not dumb, a smart, fun slasher movie. that's what I want. And in 5 minutes, before even the credits are rolling, it's like, oh, okay, you know exactly what you're doing. You know exactly the tone and the vibe. You know all of these movies, like the way that they look, the pacing of them, and that's what we're in for.
Yeah, and it kind of, because I feel like good slashers are like the panto of horror films. You know, where you like the ones where you want to yell at the screen because you see the killer behind them and stuff like that. It's that kind of stuff that's fun, where it's not that like they're fun, but they're not like knee slapping comedies where you're like, ha ha ha, isn't this hilarious? It's like, oh my god, turn around. It's that feeling. He's behind you, and that's what they already had with that. Like, there's that beautiful bit where Maya Hawke is like going past the mask, and then he steps out from there, and it's like, yes, realistically, I feel like she would have known there was a person there because the other masks are on a shelf and there's a person attached to this one. But it's so great visually, and it's like, it doesn't matter that's like, which is why I forgave the mall thing. I was like, I feel like there'd be more places to run to, but I forgive you because it's great. Yeah.
It's kind of the rules of the genre as well. Like, you always get victims of the slasher killers who are making all the wrong choices. That's also kind of part of the fun, to see them make the wrong choices.
The only criticism I would really have is that I wish it was a bit longer, that opening. Like, I wish there was that, because what's nice about the beginning of Scream is that it actually seems okay for a little while. It just seems kind of normal for a little while, which is why what happens is such a surprise, because you're just like, oh, someone's calling her. It's probably a joke. And I think this turned so quickly. And then even the chase isn't very long. And like, I feel like this whole section could have actually like breathed a little bit. Like, it's so much fun. You could have lulled us into like more of a sense of security and then terrified us for a little bit longer. But that's just because I want more Scream situations. That might be a personal note.
So let's talk about the characters, because after that scene, there's the credits, and the film does the kind of the same thing that all the slashers from the 90s do, which I also love. It's like they give you one like gory murder, and then they completely shift tone, and they introduce you to the town and the characters and the overall like dynamics that exist there. And here with this already, Fear Street 1994 is quite different, because all the characters we meet are kind of Scooby-Doo gang are weirdos in their own way. These are not Sidney Prescotts, they're not cheerleaders. Well, one of them is, but they're not kind of the usual type of protagonist that we get in slashers. What did you make of our leads?
I really like them. So the main girl, Dina, who is a scrappy lesbian from the wrong side of the tracks, big fan. And they give you like the bait and switch at the beginning, right? So what they do is they kind of go, she's writing a letter to Sam, who's obviously someone and you assume it's a boy, which because our annoying heteronormative brains are like, oh, she's upset about some boy called Sam. And then they keep it going up until she's at the game, and there's a guy kissing a girl, and you assume the guy is Sam, and you're like, oh, she's upset he's with another girl. And then it's the girl, and you're like, yes. And I was like, that was done really well. Like, this is really clever. They've gone, and then they don't make a big deal about it. Then it's like, once you realize it's not like wink wink, they're just like, yeah, they're exes, and they have like this relationship, they've broken up. It's a matter of contention. And then they don't ever like question it again. It's never like, they're never trying to pull the wall over your eyes again about it. They're just like, no, this is it. And you're on board, and that's fine. But yeah, two of them Sam's a cheerleader, and so is Kate, right? Or is she just wearing a weird outfit?
Kate is a cheerleader, but Kate is the cheerleader for Shady Side, for their team, the Witches, and Sam has just moved over to Sunnyvale, so that's the rich town that is kind of always in competition with Shady Side.
What I love about R.L. Stine is that he's not even like, no, I'm going to be like clever. He's like, the bad kids live on Shady Side, and the rich good people live in Sunnyvale. The sheriff is literally called Sheriff Good. Like it's
Yes.
it's not even. He's
not
like,
subtle.
"No, here it is. What should I call this? I don't know. Yeah, I love them, and I love that they're kind of. So there's this whole thing from the 80s to 90s about these kind of abandoned kids, right? There's all the kids from these films that we love and whatever. Their parents never seem to really be around. They're like referenced, but they're mostly left to their own devices, which is something you couldn't really do now because it would be a lot harder to convince an audience that these kids are just like, who have homes, are just being left to their own devices the entire time. But they're
and that there's no communication, even like via text or
Right.
something like that would be. We're so connected to everyone all the time.
Exactly.
It would be extreme.
Whereas then, like, the 80s and 90s was, like, obviously a time when, like, people for the first time were like, oh my God, kids get kidnapped and molested, guys. Like, they literally just hadn't realized that happened before. So there wasn't the concern for children. Like, it was like, come home when the streetlights come on. It was, and there was an assumption, like, if they didn't come home, it'd be like, oh, they're probably staying at so-and-so's house, and they knew everyone's mother's numbers, and you know they'd rely on other people's parents to feed them, and it was so I love that idea. Because honestly, parents would just ruin it. So I love that they're these group of kids for whatever reason, which we never really get an explanation for. And we assume they're like working or whatever, but their parents aren't really around. So they're really very much left to, and there's a feeling of like not trusting adults either, which I also love.
Yeah, there's like a really big separation between the teen world and the adult world, and we don't really. The only adults really that we see are the police officers, with like Sheriff Good and his like officers who make fun of the teenagers when they ask for help, and they aren't really presented as trustworthy figures at all. They're just like the authority. And the parents, we don't see them.
One parent at the end, and that's it. Like, and I also love that the kids, even if they're from Sunnyvale or Shadyside, they close ranks when talking to an adult. They literally just lie. They just go, "Well, we're just covering this." And I love that. Even though you hate each other, there is a line that you do not cross, which is that you don't snitch. You don't you close ranks, and when that happens, so even though they're outsiders and stuff, like the Shadyside kids, the gang we end up with, I still love it. It's a connection between kids still. It's still all about the kids and their feelings and their rivalries and their issues. And the reason they're outsiders is not really like, so Dina she's a lesbian, but I'm not sure that that's necessarily widely known. Well, maybe, I guess, amongst the kids. She's in band. She has like a dorky band outfit. And she's from the wrong side of the tracks, which is mainly the thing. Her brother's like, you know, a little computer nerdy guy. He's
Computer
on like
nerd.
chat rooms. Yeah. Like being.
He's on like serial killer chat rooms, which I really love and empathize with.
I'm sure we can all relate. And then Kate and Simon they're very much. I love this trope that's come from somewhere, which I don't know where, of like the cheerleader and her weird male friend who they just hang out with, which we also see in Booksmart, like the popular girl and weird guy friend who she's always with for some reason. And I love it. Like, it's even a bit like Buffy and Xander. If Xander wasn't an absolute piece of shit, which I won't get into now, but it's like that kind of trope.
I'm gonna posit a theory here. I might be wrong, but I'm gonna say it's a flawed theory but hear me out. So you know in Pretty in Pink, the John Hughes film with Molly Ringwald and Ducky. Ducky is the weird, like quirky boy friend who is a boy who's kind of hanging on, potentially probably pining for his female friend. The reason this theory is flawed is because Molly Ringwald's character is not popular in that film, because she's very much also from the other side of the tracks and stuff. But that dynamic of like the protagonist, the girl protagonist, and her weird, quirky, hanger-on pal, who's a guy, might be coming from there.
Yeah.
Because there is also a school of thought that, school of thought sounds very hoity-toity, but there's people who think that Ducky is just closeted and needs to like understand that he's not attracted to Andy.
Well, that's interesting because I know in that film they were meant to end up together, and then the test audiences didn't like it. They were like, she deserves better than this like guy who's been nice to her the whole time.
If you rewatch the film, Ducky's actually a massive asshole. He's very much like in the Xander vein.
Which was also very much like that 80s thing, like where they were just like, it's okay that this girl has a guy friend that just wants to have sex with her and is like a kind of a dick about it the entire time. He's still her friend. He's still a good guy. But it's like, is he? But this is interesting because this is like truly platonic. Mm-hmm. These and they deal drugs together, which is kind of like a really random like side bit. They're just like, they know a lot about drugs. They deal drugs together. Mm-hmm. They have twins there babysitting, like packaging drugs for them. So they're running a little business together, and I'm just like, they're really just friends. There's nothing else between them. Just like a weird pair of people who are pals. And they probably supply quite a lot of people with drugs, which is also weird why they're like outsiders, because you're just like, well, they are like the hookup, clearly.
Which I guess is kind of also perhaps, I'm not sure if this is a knowing one, but it feels to me like something out of The Faculty, where Josh Hartnett's character is like the hot guy, but he's also the school drug dealer, and that makes him an outsider, because even though he's the hookup, people are kind of afraid of him as well. And I think perhaps here they're outsiders because, like, yes, they will hook up everyone with drugs, but also that makes them, I guess, a little bit dangerous
like,
or untrustworthy. Yeah.
Like, no one wants to be friends with their dealer. Like, so they're just like, we want the drugs, we don't want to talk to you. Yeah, I know. And then Sam, so as you said, Sam, who's like Dina's ex-girlfriend, is from Shady Side. I was like, Shadyville? I'm just going to start renaming it. From Dark Side. But she's from Shady Side, but has just moved to Sunnyvale, which initially I thought was called Sunnydale. And I was like, no, they haven't. But yeah, so she's moved, and it's very interesting that even just moving immediately gets you into this club of being a Sunnyvaler now. So she's not shunned in Sunnyvale because she's actually from Shady Side. She's just welcomed into the fold. And the divide is real. But she really can't escape. She can never escape her Shady Side, which is like the kind of the thing you can't escape. That you're from here. It doesn't matter that you move. You're a Shady Sider. So bad shit's going to happen to you. Yeah, so I love them. What a glorious bunch of people. They're all very different from each other. They don't even feel like a natural group to hang out, which I like. They never make it like they're like, oh, they're going to be best pals after. It's like, no, they probably wouldn't hang out after this. It's, they're not natural friends. They just have found themselves.
It's not like a group dynamic. Like, they bond as the film progresses because they're put in this extreme situation, but they don't start out as a group of friends. There's like Dina and Josh are brother and sister, but they're kind of the dynamic between brother and sister where they're like kind of yelling at each other and being annoyed at each other all the time. They're not hanging out together. And Dina and Kate are friends, but Dina and Sam are like broken up, and Dina's very obviously still hung up on her and making her mixtape.
Yeah, I know. And then even though Dina and Kate are friends, it doesn't feel like Simon's part of that friendship necessarily. And even as they get closer throughout the film, it still doesn't feel like they're a coherent, like, oh, we're all really good pals. Like, they talk about them, the people who don't make it, they talk about them in a way that's like nice afterwards. But at the time, it's like, it's all practical. Everything they're doing is just like, what's the next thing we need to do? There isn't really bonding in the way of like, oh, we've like, we're bonding and we're realizing that actually we should have been friends this whole time. Just like, no, you've been forced into this because of like practicalities. And very much in that small town, like school way, which is like a very American high school thing where everyone kind of knows everyone anyway. So even if you don't talk to someone, you know enough about their life. So there's also that. There's like, they're coming with like this history of like vaguely knowing each other anyhow.
And they all need to find out why there's a whole bunch of people trying to murder them.
Do need to figure that out.
So let's talk about the killers, and plural, because it's not just the skull face guy from the first 5 minutes. He's dead, but then he's back. Yes. And then there's a whole other roster of murderers that they have to contend with. So what did you make about, well, which killer did you like best, and what did you make about the many murderers that the gang have to combat?
I really enjoyed the axe guy, just because he was swinging the axe like with wild abandon. He's literally just like, he's not even really trying to aim. He's just like, wah! Like he's having a ball. And I was like, really like this guy, like really some gusto in there. He's just like so eager, so keen. He's like running everywhere, and he's like swinging before he even knows what's happening. Getting his axe caught, and like he's just overexcited. He's like, oh my god, I get to murder people. Let me go. Let's go. I love him. Big fan. I'm so happy about it. And you know, I just like when people really enjoy their job, Anna. I just want you to be enthusiastic. He loves his job. It's great.
Oh my god, I get to murder people.
Cloth mask on. He's having a great time. I love it. So he's my favorite for sure. But they're all really different. I enjoyed all of them. I actually wish there were more. So they go through all the people who've killed before. I'm like, oh, all of them coming back? And it's like, oh, no, 3 of them. That's it. That's the rest. I want to meet the rest of these guys. I want to meet the baby guy with the baseball bat. Like, there's all these other, like, the little child one. Like, I'm like, there's lots of them I'd be very keen to. I'm sure I will meet them as the films progress. But I was like, oh, I kind of want the whole battalion of these, like, monsters to come after them. But maybe 3 was enough. I mean, they had their hands full with 3. But I like I said, I like Skullface because he was Ghostface. And the way he ran around, he's in his black cloak and his mask. And I was like, I actually really love that this character's here. Like, there's a bit in the supermarket where he's chasing Josh and he's like looking down every aisle. I'm like, this is literally from Scream. It feels like it's from Scream. Even the way he's just like, like he's like running and like being like, is he there? And it's like, it feels like it's a teenage boy. Like playing killer. And I'm like, I love this. I don't know if he was directed to do this like Ghostface, because it's perfect.
Lee Janiak showed the cast Scream and The Goonies, and we're like, these are the 2 films you need to get. This is the vibe we're going for. And then, like, I think I Know What You Did Last Summer and a bunch of other kind of 90s slasher references, but Scream and The Goonies are the ones that they've mentioned. These are the ones that you need to get.
The Goonies, of course, that's very much like, that makes a lot of sense. Even the rivalry
makes a lot of sense.
That's really good reference. How exciting as a director to show these teenagers like these films, be like, here you go. Here's the first time you're seeing Scream and The Goonies. I'm responsible for that. Like, how thrilling. I'd be like,
I mean, she mentioned this amazing thing where she made them mixtapes of music from the 90s, like very much in the vein of Dina making mixtape for Sam, but obviously different. Like, she'd give them the music to put them, not necessarily music that would feature in the soundtrack, although we'll talk about the soundtrack, which is absolutely banging, but to put them in the mood of like, this is the vibe that we're going for. This is what it sounds like. This is what this universe needs to sound like, and what it needs to these scenes need to feel like.
Wow. What?
And it was really interesting. This is not something that she told me, but I interviewed the cast for another thing, and apparently when a scene wasn't clicking, she would like get them, whoever was acting, she'd get them over, like, come here to my laptop, and she'd play them a song, be like, this is what this scene needs to feel like, and they would be like, yes, I got it.
Amazing. That's amazing.
Love that.
What a joy that must have been. That. Like, what a fun. Oh man, I'd love to be on that set. It's like, yeah, mixtapes and 90s nostalgia.
And what did you make of that? Like, there's this amazing montage of killers. I think this is in the exposition scene that Josh is doing when he's like running through the history of serial killers in Shadyside, which I know on paper it sounds bad, but I think it would be really fun, personally, to grow up in a town that has like a big murder history. Maybe. I don't know what that says about me, but I'd have a lot of fun putting together a serial killer scrapbook.
You're like, can I move there? It's a real estate. I'm sure it'd be cheap. You could probably buy a house.
I'm sure it'll be cheap. I could buy a house for like £50.
Yeah.
I'm sure
You could move tomorrow, babes. You're like, you'd be like a millionaire there. They'd be like, oh, this crazy lady's moved to Shadyside.
So on that note, let's hear a little bit from director Lee Janiak on the history of serial killers in Shadyside. This is a weird way to phrase the question. I'm sorry. What was like the tapestry of serial killer and horror film influences that went into that?
I mean, so much that it was very dark. It was a very dark place during prep. I spent a lot of time with the other writers. We thought about kind of what are the kind of the archetypes that we want to be, visiting first. So obviously Skull Mask came from this idea of this kind of Halloween masked type character that we saw a lot in the 90s. And then with the 70s, we wanted to be more the traditional axe murderer, like that kind of like man in the woods type thing. But then, there's not a lot. There's not a lot of slashers that happen in other time periods, it turns out. So we kind of looked at what the, what the archetype might be of just like the image of what that era might be. And then we thought about how can we twist that? How can we like start to hint at a backstory without like fully like marrying ourselves to like exactly what happened, but like give a little bit there, like start to live. So Ruby was really interesting because we liked the idea of this girl who was just kind of like a little edgy, a little like, kind of out there, and then got turned by the witch into this killer who totally snapped. The milkman is one of my favorites. It creeps me out so much. I think he like is the creepiest to me of all of them. And maybe because I know like what my backstory is for him about killing housewives. And Billy Barker was fun. We looked at Depression era things, and there was a lot of time spent looking at masks from the different eras. The mask that the guy, we call him the shame killer because it's a shame mask that they used to put on people kind of in, I think, 17th century Germany. So we did like lots of different research to kind of start to fill out those worlds. Yeah.
I mean, that sounds like both fun and mildly traumatizing research.
Totally.
And if you can share, could you share the backstory of the milkman?
Yeah, no, the milkman. So the idea with the milkman was that he had been a vet that had been in World War II, and that's where he got burned. That was the idea, that he got like horribly misfigured, and he came back and he was kind of shunned by being like, the person that made you uncomfortable because of how they looked outwardly. And then when the witch turned him, he started targeting these women who felt like they were the ones that were like looking at him weird, clutching their purses when he was around prior to the turn. And so he kind of focused on them and kind of you can see that he has like a bit of a pervert vibe, like in the movie, like he like licks Ziggy sometimes. He's smelling. He's kind of creepy. So there was a sexual element to him too that we didn't obviously go into because it felt like a little dark, but that was there too.
What did you make of the montage of all the killers, where it's basically like a who's who of the history of slasher films?
I loved it because everyone is like, oh, it fits into this thing. And it reminded me of, what's the film that came out recently from the book about the dark? Oh, God. Guillermo del Toro.
Oh, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark.
Which is another book I absolutely adored. Scared the shit out of me, but I absolutely adored it. And it felt like that. All these stories, all these like things where it's just like, oh my God, all these scary things that have like come before, and here's like a snippet of them. And like, you only have to mention like the lady looking for a toe or whatever who it is in it from things. I'm like, oh, that's enough. I remember everything. It's fine. And I loved it because it felt like that. It's like, oh, here's like literally a shot of it, and you realize how bad it was. You know how like this is already gruesome. I don't even need to see everything they did. It's like, especially the kid one was really like, like I need to know about this one. I really need to know. And then the original one, which is like the preacher who like ripped out kids' eyes or something. I was like, these are all just. And what's great about them is because I guess at this point or fairly early on, it's to do with like the witch. That there's no reason behind it. It's not like, oh, this person, this bad thing happened to them, and then they decided that they hate, which is obviously the trope of a lot of slashers, is like, I'm getting revenge somehow for this way I was treated, the way I was raised, whatever it was. And this is not that. It's just like, no, there's no rhyme or reason to it. This person just from one day to the next has decided they're doing this to people. And that's it. And I love that because I'm just like, you can't reason your way out of this. Like, and like you said at the beginning, because they show you who it is under the mask, it's like finding out won't help anything about like knowing who that person was or is won't help you at all. It's just context. It's just a reference point. And I love it. Like this, it has that feeling of unstoppable killers, right? So nothing's really going to stop them. They're going to be coming no matter what. And actually it's going to be a lot harder. And even they do the thing, like they find the bones, they bury the bones, all the things that have come before in films. It's like, this is what we need to do to like save ourselves. And like, none of it's enough. So I love that. I love the like roster of killers. I love there's so many. I'm like, like if all of them turned up, guys, like what is anyone going to do? And it's like, I love that they're like Shady Side has like, a history of like killers and stuff. But not like, oh, there's been a lot of murders. It's like, no, we have like very specific, like horrendous. It's like, is no one, I feel like the FBI would be there, like, guys, what's happening here? Because like very much in this vein of Stranger Things, where there's like these weird scientists being like, oh, this weird thing that is here, an entrance to something here or whatever. I feel like there'd be that situation in Shady Side because I'm just like, no way. People have been like, yeah, just a lot of murders. Don't know why. It's like, really? Not like murders, not like regular murders, like psychotic, horrendous, like.
There's regular murders and then there's like venti murders, which is the extreme serial killing that Shady Side has.
And like, a preacher is ripping out children's eyes. What are you talking? There's a kid beating people to death with a baseball bat. Like, this is not your run of the mill. And they're just like, oh, what's going on? Oh no. And I'm just, I don't know. I'd be you can move that. I'd be terrified every day of my life. I'm like, I feel like I'm almost guaranteed to get murdered at some point. I'd impose a curfew on myself. Would.
If I ever move to Shady Side, obviously this is a fictional town, but now I'm living this reality in a portion of my brain. Like, if I moved into my 50-pound house, which I would 100% decorate in the same vibe as Guillermo del Toro, and have a room.
I knew you were going to say
I'd have a serial killer library with a window where it constantly rained and stormed, even though it was always sunny. Which is what he has in his writing room, and I'm really jealous and I want it. I want it.
I was like, she want to live in Guillermo del Toro's house, like in Shady Side. She'd have the creepiest house in the creepiest town in America. You'd be like the scary lady that everyone was like scared to go by her house.
I would cultivate that image so the serial killers wouldn't murder me. I'd be like the walking Wikipedia of serial killers of Shady Side, which is what Josh does. And I was like, I love his monologue with the montage of the killers because he's just like slamming down these, newspaper clippings, and being like, did you not know about Ruby Lake? Like the girl who was singing while she murdered her boyfriend?
But also, I love that no one else, you live in a town where this happens on a regular basis. Everyone's just like, what? How do you know about all this? It's like, guys, not even a tiny bit curious, like, about all the murders that happen in your town? If that happened in my town, like, a regular crime happens near I'm like, oh, my goodness, like, can't believe that happened, like, looking up everything about it. And they're just like, oh, we've never thought to even look into this. One guy is like,
I think this is like this is where
this.
it's kind of similar to It, I guess, because It has the same vibe, right? Because Derry is like has all these horrific child disappearances and murders, and no one seems to give a shit except Mike, the librarian, who's the only one who stays there and like keeps track of all these things. And you're like, did nobody else was curious? Nobody saw the patterns? Nobody, like, investigated?
Which is why I think a lot of these films have to be set at a certain time in history, because like we said, now it wouldn't work. Because there really was a time where people didn't think to look for missing children. They just didn't do it. It just was, like, not worth their time. It was such a bizarre time in history for, like, police. I don't really know what they were doing. They would just kind of make, like, a good example is like when Ted Bundy killed his first victims, for example, these girls had disappeared in the night, right? There was blood all over their pillows, and the police were like, they probably got a nosebleed and have gone on some sort of weird road trip or something. You know what you kids are like now. And I'm like, what a leap to, like, no one's heard from them, no one's seen them. In the middle of the night, they got a nosebleed and were like, well, better pack my bag, not even pack a bag, leave with nothing and go on a road trip. And that's really how they thought. And that was like two women who clearly been murdered. And so when kids were just like missing without a trace, they just couldn't wrap their head around that someone would do something that's sinister to a child. They assumed it was like a child's, well, you know what children are like, they've gone off, they've got themselves in trouble, they've gone off with like, they've run away or whatever. It just wasn't a concern. So in It, I was like, yeah, people would just be like, oh, don't know what's going on. Like, they're all just running away, I guess. And it completely tracks, unfortunately.
There's something so insightful about what you just said, because it's like, actually listening to you speak about it, it's like, fuck, that's the reason why all of these movies that we love and that people keep rediscovering and coming back to and sort of talking in this as, you know, as modern classics, teen and sort of preteen movies from the 80s and 90s, because it was perhaps that last era, as you're talking about, where the kids world, the teen world and the adult world were quite separate. Like, it was, the separation was harsh and stark, and you could like go off and get yourself in trouble and have these adventures. So watching that, all these films like Stand By Me, like It, It, the book and the miniseries, the contemporary adaptations, obviously more recent, but they tap into that. Even Stranger Things like reminds us of that, and so does this film, where it's like, actually this whole thing is happening in the teenage world, so they're limited and kind of alone. Like, there are adults over there. It's not like they're living in a town where there's no adults ever. But going to those figures of authority is just not an option. They're always separate. They don't count in these stories. That's not how they think. And there's no one's chasing after these kids. They're like, are you home yet? Text me when you get there. Do this when you do this. Yeah. It's like, no. They're completely on their own mission. So everything they do is kind of like, it's kind of makeshifty. It's kind of perhaps making mistakes, but like, fuck them. They're teenagers. There is a limit to what they know.
Yeah. And like, what do you do if you're like, someone's like, they've just been tried to, like, someone's been murdered in the hospital, like several people have been murdered in the hospital. Someone's tried to kill you. You go to the police and you tell them, they're just like, doesn't sound real. So, and you're like, what do you do after that point? Who do you go to? If you've gone to like the actual one authority that's meant to take care of stuff like that, and it's literally because they're teens. If an adult came and was like, someone's killing people in the hospital, he'd be like, oh God, I better go check this out. And just the idea that teens were dismissed. And also, even the fact that Dina and Sam are gay, is that, because, you know, there's a whole thing with police, which we still know about, which especially at a certain point in time, where they wouldn't really go to the bad side of town. It's not their main priority. Like, if you live in a good side of town, you have a better relationship with the police because they will turn up. If someone's breaking into your house, they will turn up. If someone in the poor side of town is like someone's breaking it, they'll be like, well, that happens all the time. So is that really a big deal? And especially because, you know, homosexual people weren't really accepted. Even then, if they knew you were, they take you less seriously for some reason. Like, they're like you gay people are all just liars, or I don't know what they thought, but they just would take it less seriously. And it's stuff like that we have to remember is that around those times, like, so I was listening to a thing about Kitty Genovese, which is that woman that got murdered in New York, right? So 911 didn't exist before, well, when this murder happened. There weren't as many street lights. They knew police wouldn't come to certain areas. Like, if you were non-white and you called the police, they probably wouldn't come. If they knew you, like, hung around specific gay bars or whatever, they probably wouldn't come. So there was just this nonchalant, like, not bothered at all attitude the police had, which I think dragged on till quite late, where they were just like, there are certain things that you just don't need to take seriously. And the kids have no options after that. Like, what are their parents? Who knows where their parents are, but what would they do? Like, and actually, no one can even really save them or protect them, to be fair, in that situation, because they are much more open to the idea of what this actually is. Whereas wasting time trying to convince an adult that this is what's happening is actually just like time you're wasting. Like, it's just, then it's going to take too long until they will literally see someone die from it, which is usually what happens in these films. They're like, oh, maybe you're right. It's like, yeah, maybe. So it always, like, kids are just kind of, they just kind of accept they see what's happening and go, this is what's going on. This is it. This is the only explanation for this. And which is why I love Joyce Byers in Stranger Things, because she's just on board. Joyce is like, listen, something weird's happening. I believe the kids. I'm on side. And I'm like, I love that they gave her this one adult that actually was trying to do something. But in most of these teen films, there isn't any. They just don't care. And they think there's like a way to protect people. Like in the Scream films, they think the way to protect Sydney is to the police just do their policing. Like, we know how to protect you. This is the one way we do this. And it's like, listen, no, it's not going to work. And you're not being smart enough about this. Like, you having your gun is not enough when the killer's smarter than you.
If we add the supernatural element to it as well, it's like an additional thing, because it's hard enough for these kids to convince the adults that there's a killer that's trying to murder them. But if they start saying, actually, there's multiple killers and all of them are dead, but they're still coming back and very much are trying and succeeding in murdering us, please help. That's a much bigger task. So what did you make of the way that, like, because the supernatural element really surprised me, because that's not kind of part of the tropes of the slasher film, at least the ones that this film in particular is trying to emulate from the 90s. Like, how do you think it merged the supernatural elements with the familiar slasher ones?
I love a good witch story. So I love that it's like, oh, it's still a familiar trope where it's like, it's a witch getting revenge from beyond the grave for being so mistreated. What I love about that trope, especially, is that I'm like, yes, loads of women were persecuted. The issue with like the burning and hanging of witches was that they were just regular women, and actually they weren't doing anything, and it was just an easy, convenient way to get rid of women you didn't like, or like people you didn't like, mostly women. And I love in all these tropes where it's just like this witch, it's like, oh, so she was a witch. So she was an incredibly effective and powerful witch, actually. So the townspeople weren't 100% wrong. They've angered an actual witch. So I love it. It's like, not even the injustice storyline holds up, because they're just like, so they burned an actual witch. They were bang on the money in this case. But okay. But yeah, it's basically because, you know, it's her getting from revenge. I'm sure we're going to find out. It's not really explained why she wants. There's like a little rhyme. I love a little rhyme as well that tells everyone what she does. And everyone's just ignored it until this point. It's like there's literally a rhyme that tells you exactly what's going to happen. But yeah, she's just angry at everybody. It seems like she's like, you know what? Anyone who comes anywhere near my bones, fuck you guys. You're all dead.
That's a rhyme. That's a Sarah Fear rhyme.
And I love yeah, she's like, oh, you walked near
Dead.
my bones? Everyone's dying. Everyone's dying. Every one of you. Sick of this. Just trying to rest in peace. How dare you? Like she's the supernatural equivalent of like an old lady being like, get off my porch. Like she's just so angry.
Get off my bones.
And she just pissed. And then we don't know yet why every so few years she just invokes her, like someone to become a murderer, because this is different, right? So the initial mall murders is what happens every few years, where like someone who is seemingly fine just decides to start killing people. What's happening to this particular group of kids is different, because she's pissed at them because they stood on her porch. This is like a different thing, where she's like extra pissed and she's like, I'm invoking everybody, like everyone's coming for you. My axe guy's coming for you. I'm saying my best guy. He loves his job. He's gonna be really good at it. So I love that it also played into another trope. And then it's so many things mixed together. I adore it, because the killers are also like we've said, they're quite familiar manifestations of killers from slashers, right? Guy with an axe and mask, girl with a razor who was singing is like a creepy like song, Ghostface, like it's all things we recognize, but they're supernatural. So it's like imbues them with this power or this unseen, like they have a boss. It's like they're
if you kill them, and they kill a lot of the killers multiple times, especially in those booby traps that they set up. There's like a great like Goonies moment where they're setting up all these booby traps to like get all the killers together in one room in the high school, and they blow them up, and that doesn't work because they can just come back. They can like literally rematerialize, like in Hot Shots 2, they like get up from the goo.
Or like Terminator.
Obviously,
it's like
very highbrow, because I
Terminator
went to
2.
Hot Shots 2 and instead of Terminator 2. Fuck, I'm very embarrassed. My spectrum of references is like Hot Shots 2.
Wow, you're like exactly like Hot. I confused the characters from Scary Movie and Scream earlier. I was like, wait, which one's the real one? I've watched them both equal amount of times, and I'm confused about it now. But like, so they're unstoppable. So that's more in the vein of the slasher killer we get, like Freddy Krueger or Mike Myers, who has also been fully murdered several times. But somehow there's even a new film coming out. I can't wait for it. But like, there's a new film coming out this year. It's like, I've watched this man die, but sure. And so it imbues them with this power. So it just kind of like ties together all these tropes of like, what if a witch got rightly accused of witchcraft and murdered, correctly accused of witchcraft and killed, but then wants revenge? What if it's that trope, a witch trying to get revenge because her grave disturbed? So it's like a burial of the bones and like this whole thing of like all that trope. But then what also, if she was also the boss of these like serial killers that existed for a time and everyone thought was gone away, but actually she can bring back at any point. And then what if they have that serial killer ability to just turn up wherever you are and always be able to find you and come after you, and nothing you do is going to stop them until you figure out this mystery of like what to do. It's so many things tied together. It's like, what if they were all connected? And I know they're going to explain it more as the films go on. So we've just scratched the surface now. So I'm just like, we're going to find out a lot more, because they bury the bones. And I love the idea. It's like, no, she doesn't care about, she cares about her grave being disturbed, but that's not what she needs from you. She's pissed. She's not like, please find my bones and bury them. It's not one of those stories. She's like, no, I fucking hate you.
You're dead now.
Like, that's my issue.
But I love that they they go through several theories. Like, they sort of really go through everything. They try killing the killers. That doesn't really work. They come back. Then they go try to understand, like, how do we like Sam is sort of marked by the blood of Seraphir. And it's like, okay, so what happened before? There was someone else at the camp who survived. So the next installment of the Fear Street franchise is going to be 1978. So there's like already an allusion to like there was someone else who survived a massacre. How did she do it? She died for a brief moment. So they're like, we need to kill Sam for, like put her into cardiac arrest basically. And then that will stop them. Like the whole, and I love the drug montage. Again, this is the faculty. It's like, oh yeah, by the way, the secret to surviving this ordeal is getting so high that you OD. And let us now explain like the formula for killing you and bringing you back to life. And then it's like this countdown, which works so well because like as all the killers are coming back and chasing after them, and like it's this heightened situation, you're like, Sam and Dina are just like literally trying to kill her, but in a really specific way with pills. And it's such a great scene where she's like drowning her and everyone is coming up behind her and like poof, they disappear. Yeah,
it's fantastic. And the idea of like, and also I love that's why these films always have to be teens, because only teenagers would be like, all right, I guess I got to die for a couple of seconds. Because adults would be like, no, there must be another. But teens are like, fuck it. Yep. Let's go. Let's drown me. I like they take the lobster out the tank before they drown her. So I was like, I don't think he would have done anything to her.
That's adorable.
This is great. But also that water would have been foul. I was like,
but only teens would not care. Teens would not care. Teens would be like, okay, what is there a toilet? Is there a lobster tank? Whatever there is, I'll kill myself in that tank.
Let's drown me in that. So I love that they're just like, we've got a plan. We just got to see it through. And that they're all fully willing to die for this. They know they're entirely putting themselves at risk. And they're prepared for it.
Can we talk about the deaths?
The deaths?
Because I don't know about you. I was not expecting that at all.
No, I was not. That was like first Final Destination levels of like, these are good deaths. This has been well done. Kate's one is just like, because it's one of those moments where you're assuming you're like, she's gonna get out of this.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like. She's gonna fight back. She's gonna find a way to like get out of this. And then it's like, oh no, he sliced up her head in a bread slice slayer, like, which is just, and they really show you. It's not like, hey guys, her head's gone in there. It's like, here's slices of her head. I was like, oh.
Like, I obviously like gory films. I was not prepared for Fear Street 1994 to go that far. And I respect you a lot, because you are definitely bringing back the violent 90s slasher vibes. This is no Stranger Things bullshit. This is like hardcore slasher.
Kids are gonna die.
The Scooby-Doo gang is also like fallible. They can also be killed.
And I love that it's also towards the end. Like, this is the moment where in most of these films, like in Stranger Things or like whatever shows or films like this, where they rally, they figure it out, they're fighting their hardest. So actually, most of them make it. And they've got this far, and then it's like, no, bread slice ahead. Here it is. And they really let you see it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I think I was like, oh my God, that is more, but like in that way where it doesn't feel like you know that when deaths are so like silly, not silly, but like gruesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's such a crazy way to die that you're like, oh wow, this, like, it feels like Final Destination. Like that fun, like, how's this person gonna die in this scene? It felt like that, where I was like, oh, unexpected. Like, oh, that's a good, and to do it at this point is like really clever. And then Simon gets an axe in the head, which that's like a good shock. That's like a good, like, oh, didn't know that was about to happen in that particular way. Axeman finally found a mark with his axe.
Good at his job.
Just been swinging it around that whole time. He's like, did it, finally.
Yeah. Tick. I've got that off my to-do list.
Did it. Yeah, and so I love they wait to that. This film also has about like, it has several endings, right?
Yes.
So the bit in the school feels like the natural climax. And to the point where I was like, I had to check how much time was left. Because like, I feel like I'm being tricked into thinking this is the big moment, right? Because they give them, which a lot of these films have, they give them that moment of levity, right? Where they have their plan in place and like Sam and Dina get back together and like Josh and Kate have a kiss and Simon jacks off and you know, there's this moment of like, oh, this is their moment of last moments of togetherness and this is our last chance to have like a kiss and like before we put our plan in place and then we'll see what happens. And that's not even remotely the end. It's like, no, this is just them gearing up to the first fight of it, the first real attempt at testing out their theory.
What did you make of the real ending? Because they kind of leave us with both a final twist, a final like Carrie's hand getting out, like creeping out of a final kind of Carrie's hand bursting out of her grave, but also with a cliffhanger. Yeah.
I loved it. I just thought it ended like 3 different times. I was like, oh, now this is the end. So they've killed her, they've brought her back, Sam, and this is the end. And then you see Sam's mum, and Sam's mum, who's not, they talk to the police. It feels like they're wrapping up when they're talking to the police. This is actually what happened. We're just going to say it's this, like, because you won't believe us if we say anything else. So I love how the police explanation is like these 2 tweakers, like, went on a killing spree. It's like, and somehow ended up with an axe in one of their heads and with one of their heads sliced, but they were somehow the masterminds of all of it. Like, what? But anyway, that's what the police theory is. And then Sam's mum comes to get her and she kisses Dina in front of her mum. And her mum, who's not concerned at all that her daughter's been terrorized for the entire night, she's like, how being a lesbian, she's that's the only thing that she's horrified. She's like, sees her holding Dina's hands, like, oh, lesbianism? Absolutely not. Murder, I'll accept. Lesbianism, no. Like, yes, I know you were almost murdered. No reason that you should be holding a girl's hand. Ridiculous. So you think that's the end, and you see the girls hanging out, and then there's a moment of like the pretend jump scare where the bell rings and then Josh is just outside the door eating pizza. He's like grown up. He's ordering pizza for himself and he's like,
I love that moment.
Right. So you're like back to normal. And then it feels like the next thing that's going to happen is there's going to be like another killer that comes. That feels like how most slashers would end, is that actually they're not safe from the threat outside. But then the threat is coming from inside the house. Like,
the witch is not dead.
No. It's already here. And before anyone even knows what's happened, someone's been stabbed. And I was like, this is like flipping it over so many times. It's all happening too fast for you even to like you're like, oh my God, wait, what? Oh my God, wait, what? And by the moment you've realized, oh, this is what's going to happen next, it's happening.
Yes, you're exactly right.
Yeah. And I think it's really a clever way because we do know all the tropes and it's still not really different from other films we've seen. It's just that they're all in one film, which is not something that we've seen. It's like, no, anything from that genre of those times is up for grabs in this film from any film you can think of. So that's what's clever about it. It's like, yeah, it feels like Scream at the beginning, but it's not like Scream. So it feels like this other thing. It feels like, I don't know, like witch films it's so clever because I'm just like, oh, he's what am I talking about? I don't know. I'm like, you've come with the basis of R.L. Stine, which gives you quite a lot of space, which I think like the Goosebumps books do as well, to build on. And like, you can go, this is the basis of the story, but then what if we brought all the elements of all the other books or whatever into this one story, which is what they did with Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. They're like, rather than have them as individual stories, what if all the scary stories were in this one film terrorizing this one group of kids? But what's happened in this film is it's like, oh no, I have a grab bag of all these horror films and I can cherry pick anything I want from these films. Tropes, but in a way that you're not expecting to happen right now. Oh, you think this is the end because this is usually the end, but no, it's not. And I'm going to do that several times. And then because the films are separated by so many years, I wasn't sure how they'd link. I was like, so is it going backwards? As in, are we coming to the source of what happened? But then what it feels like is what's actually happening is they're going back to like explain. So we're still not necessarily leaving the world of the 90s. It's more like we have to go back to explain for these kids here to understand how to fix this problem, which I did not expect either. I'm obsessed with it already. I'm like, this is way smarter than it gives the impression it is at the beginning.
Yes.
It's so layered.
It's so fun to listen to you talk about them without having seen the next ones. Yeah. And I'm doing a lot of work to like absolutely show nothing about what I know because I want you to enjoy the full breadth of what they're doing. Yeah. But on that ending, fuck me, does it do like 7 different things in that one scene. So on the one hand, on the character side, it's like a perfect arc, even within the movie, where like even there's these 2 very similar shots of Josh, the who we haven't really spoken about much because he's like the nerd exposition fountain of knowledge character. That's the trope that he fits into, but also kind of upends in his own way. Because he becomes braver, he gets to first base with Kate. Well done, him. And like there's this identical shot of him behind his computer where it's like the first one, he's covered himself up with a blanket, which is like, this dude is isolating himself so much from everyone, even in his own house, even in his own room or den. And by the end of it, he's like ordering dinner and talking with his sister and not feeling the need to like hide himself away from everyone and like defending his friends who have just died on the serial killer message board, where, you know, he automatically goes there and be like, hey, you know, guess what?
Hey guys.
Guess what? But also like are just making out on her bed listening to the Pixies, which is something that they were talking about. Like, I just want to lay on a bed and make out with you and listen to the Pixies, to this one particular song, Hey, which is like my favorite Pixie song. It's like, fuck, this movie is doing things to me.
Hey, must be a devil between us or horrors in my head.
We kind of talked about the whole vibe, the aesthetic of it, but what did you make of the music as well? Like the soundtrack to this film is like now that's what I call the 90s.
Yeah, it was great. It was just like, it was like listening to a playlist you made of like a very specific time in your life where you're like, oh, there's that song and there's this song. My only criticism of it would be that they never played any of them for long enough. I'd be like, oh man. And now this song's finished and here's another one, which is also great, but I wish we heard more of that song. I loved it. And I love, because music's such an easy way or such a quick way to put people in a place in time. Because your brain just, like any 70s thing, like I don't think there's any film that's set in the 70s that doesn't start with like a sweeping shot of something with someone with very 70s hair and like a song very indicative of that time just playing. Like, and it's like, it's just the easiest way to go, oh, we're here. And I think the 90s is quite hard because for people who are our age, which I'm not saying what age that is, but it doesn't feel like the past to us in the same way. It's like, oh, this still feels quite modern. So I think with the 90s, it's actually quite hard to do because I think it's a lot harder to go, this is very specifically the 90s of music, unless you were there. I think we're much better. Like, I think we'd be able to go, that's a song from the 60s, that's a song from the 70s. Whereas I think the 90s are people who didn't experience it. It's like, I don't know, it's from some time. I think it'd be hard to differentiate for maybe a teenager now what was the 90s, what was the 2000s, what was even the late 80s, to be honest. And the 90s, as we all know, actually spanned into the early 2000s. It wasn't really over. Yeah,
it was a decade that lasted 15 years, actually. Yeah.
So even that is like, it's a weird time. And I think for that reason, the aesthetic, I liked it. I liked it was in a mall. I like the, the clear phone that Dina has, like the clear like phone in her room, even like the house phone with a long cord, that stuff. But I was like, it's actually quite hard to pinpoint what this asset, because there are people who dress like this now, especially the 90s are coming back. So like, this actually looks like now. None of these people would look out of place now. So I think it was quite a hard thing to do with it, unless you like really lent into like one aesthetic, like grunge or something. It's actually quite hard so you relied on other markers, you relied on music and like house phones and stuff like that. Because I'm like, there's nothing else that's really, none of the clothes or hair or anything is different to how someone would dress now. And I think maybe it was more stuff like how the town sets out and the rivalry between schools. That felt like old school. It just felt like not now.
Yeah.
Like the way cheerleaders are dressed and the town still being like, you're not.
The attitudes as opposed to like making it feel like a period piece.
Yeah. So, and I think they probably did well to not lean into it too much. Like, I think that was a good decision because I think it would have felt quite hacky if they. So I was watching it being like, oh, it doesn't feel that specific. That's because I grew up in the 90s, and it just kind of, it doesn't feel like the past in the way other times do. Yeah, I'm sure it will at some point, but not right now. It doesn't. But I was like, if they made them like, too grungy, or there were too many nods to like, here's this very 90s thing. It's like, who is that for? It's like for a very specific group of people who lived it. Because like kids now, like younger people now will be like, I don't know what that is. So, and there's like, so if it was too heavy handed, like there's a point where Dina puts on her like little Walkman, but they don't. And I feel like other films might have been like, it's a Walkman, kids, look at this. And they didn't do that. It's like, yeah, it's just what she's using because that's what kids use at the time.
It's no big deal.
So it was like a lot more subtle. Which I don't think you have to be in the 70s. God knows what's going to happen in the 1600s. But like in the 70s, I think it can be like, you can like really ham it up. You can lay it on quite thick because all we know of the 70s is like nostalgia. What we know of it is like from films anyway. So you can lay it on quite thick. But the 90s, I'm like, it's still too close to home to lay it on too thick. It would have felt too cheesy. So I really like that they did it because it does feel like these films are for teens. It feels like, yes, older people are going to enjoy them. Older people who grew up with the original slashers and stuff are going to love them. But it feels like a new set of films for like teens to get into. And horror for that generation. They're the protagonists in it. And it's not going to be like too scary. Yes, there's some gore, but it's kind of like cartoon gore in a way. Like where it's like someone's head got sliced. It's like fun gore to talk about. It's not traumatizing. And so yeah, it feels very much like that. So I was like, I just felt like it would have been an empty gesture to be like, here's all these 90s things that teens now would be like, okay.
Yeah.
What is that?
I think you're spot on. I think you're spot on with that, and especially in how it uses not so much even costume, but like locations and music to pinpoint the area where it's happening. But I was a little bit worried that it might like fall into this nostalgia trap of like, oh my god, look, it's the 90s. And actually, it's the setting. It's so much more concerned with channeling the 90s slasher films. I think the 90s brand and look and feel of horror films from that era than it is with like looking like an ad for Urban Outfitters, which are selling Walkmans and Discmans, by the way. I find it
okay, there's a reason those are dead technologies. Like, there's a good reason. It's just not the way. No. I would be furious if I see someone. I'd be like, really? You've got your music on a cassette tape?
I'd be more disturbed by a Discman than a cassette tape player, because I know that a lot of like bands are putting out their new music on cassettes as well. I'm like, I don't know why, but okay. I guess it's like...
But CDs were never going to be... They just at some point would always not really work. Not really. Walkmans were just the most annoying thing. Discmans, because they'd always skip. It's very hard to like keep them still enough. It was just too much.
You know what we're doing now? We've become the old ladies on the bench, like talking about
Get
like
off my
the Walkmans were always bad. The vinyls were the ones the vinyls never fail.
But I feel like so what's interesting what you just said about they were basically trying to recreate the idea of like these 90s slashers that we know. It's like those were actually they were set now at the time those came out, which is why it's clever, because it's like those weren't trying to achieve a 90s aesthetic, they just had one because they were set at a certain time. So I think you're right, it's more clever to base it on those films than base it on like what we imagine the 90s to be, because it's like, well, no, it was just modern times at the time. And the same with and the opposite for the 70s is like, because you can lay it on thick, because actually our references are always, it's never based on like an actual 70s film. It's like based on an idea of the 70s quite a lot.
An idea that we've built up through movies. And I guess that for younger generations who are coming, or, you know, teenagers now who are coming in to see Fear Street in the same way as we might have seen Scream or I Know What You Did Last Summer for the first time, they've also only known the 90s through these films. So actually the universe that they exist in is quite similar, deliberately so. But I think it's smart for younger audiences because, you know, when you build up an image or knowledge of an era or a particular time and moment, because, you know, the 90s are not the same everywhere. I'm talking like very specific, but like fictional small American towns, that 90s. It's got a very specific vibe. So you're kind of like going back to the same town where Buffy and Scream and I Know What You Did Last Summer and Urban Legend were happening. So if teens had seen those films, even by accident, because they were on Netflix for a brief moment of time or something, it's still like a familiar universe to go into. Yeah.
So, if you've seen this, and then if you go back, I guess if you see the Fear Street films first, if you see like the 90s one first, and then you go back, it'd be interesting actually to do, I wish I could like remove my brain and like do that and like give it a wash and like watch Fear Street and then go back through all those films and see them and see where all those things come from. It'll be so interesting. To see teens go, oh, what is this a reference to? Or like watching those other films later on, but by accident, and being like, oh, this is like that. And it's like, it's like kids now realizing what samples, like hearing the songs for the first time that are sampled in songs they listen to now and realizing, oh, this was a whole song that people listen to. And it's discovering that and then finding out like, oh, and that bit's from here. And that song also sampled this other song from like the 80s or, it's like unpacking a mystery.
Not to be all like, hello, fellow kids, but if you listen to like a snippet of a song on TikTok and then you listen to the full song, that's like the equivalent that you're talking about, which is
oh, this is that was definitely like a hello, fellow kids.
It's like, hello, I am on the TikToks.
It's more akin to TikTok.
I've never felt more Steve Buscemi-esque than I did in that moment. I do apologize. I've outed myself as like an old person.
I think we've both outed ourselves as like fairly old like people. I think we both, even though I've like talked about the witch being like, oh, as like I understand her point of view. That she's like a cranky old like bag of bones who's like, don't touch my bones. Get it. Teenagers are annoying. I understand. That's why I like have a fondness for the weird axe wielding man. I'm like, I get it. He's trying really hard, guys. Some credit where credit's due.
Maybe he'll be back.
I hope
Maybe he'll be back in 1978. And then there's a phone call. So we haven't mentioned the fact that at one point Sheriff Good leaves this note in someone's house, which just says it's happening again. So like all of these little things that are tying up or teasing the next film or teasing that maybe there's something larger than the kids don't know because of this like separation between the adult world and the teen world. And Dina gets this phone call from one of the survivor from the camp massacre that's going to be the central point of the second film, being like, no, there was some shit and we need to talk about. And like in slow motion, exactly as you said, when you think something's going to happen, it's already happening, where she just quietly got stabbed. It's the quietest stab I've ever seen in a slasher film.
Yeah. And you're just like, oh no. And she's picked, Sam as her next agent of chaos.
Yeah.
And you still don't know, and you get a better glimpse of the witch at that point as well. Of like, if there's active, the witch isn't some dead, gone thing. Then you realize, there's something active happening here. Someone's in like with an ulcer and like fires and stones. Is it like, magically etching these names on these, is picking ththese people. And so then you realize like, it's much more involved than some like kind of abstract, so it's even more like, it really is a boss. Someone who's like, yes, invoke you and you to go do this for me. Thank you. So it's really interesting, the fact that this is the first time in the history of this happening that, as far as we know, that Dean is like, has tied up Sam, is like, we're going to get you back. So there's an idea that, you can reverse this. There must be a way to like reverse this. And now the goal is to free Sam from the like clutches of the witch. Yeah, so it's really layered, really clever, because at this point, so you think you know what it is, but at this point I have no clue actually what the reasons are going to be, what the issues. I'm just like, I actually don't know what's going to happen here, which I did not expect to come to the end of this film and be like, I have no clue what the plan is.
I think that's my favorite thing about this film and about like horror films in general, or kind of meta horror films, which sometimes get a little bit of a bad rap, but I think it's a hard line to walk as for filmmakers, I think, because you both have to like satisfy horror fans who are kind of looking out for the things, like we're smugger than everyone else, and we'd be like, I know what's gonna happen, I know who the killer is, and then but you still want to be surprised, because like, isn't that the best possible thing that can happen when you're watching a film, that you kind of feel, well, I know what this is gonna be, I know what I'm in for, and then it's like, oh wait, hold up, no, I do know what's happening, but it's doing things that I didn't expect, but it still fits the rules. So it's like both catering to horror fans who love 90s slasher films and love these tropes and are familiar with them and enjoy them, and also giving something much more layered and smarter that keeps us guessing.
Yeah. And it has that thing about what's nice about it being set in this one town, like anything that's set in one town means there's a history there. So it means that like in It, these kids have grown up, and now it's like, so when, as far as we go back, it's like they're going to be the descendants of somebody. Like, this would have been happening for generations. So people have actually been seeing this before, which is even more annoying that the adults aren't more on board, because like you've literally been here for the other times this has happened. But I love that, because it just allows for like a whole new set of characters who are like older, who remember a thing and remember what happened, and a richer history and how they got over it, how they buried it. And it could just be like this massive expanse of like people who are just trying to forget, which I'm assuming like the other Shadyside-ers are just trying not to really deal with. They're just, I guess they're not trying very hard to keep their kids safe, but just hoping it's not their kid when it happens again. And even the kids are annoyed about going to a candlelight vigil, because it's just that like, they probably knew like Maya Hawke, who like got murdered. Her name's Heather in it, which I also love that she's called Heather. But they probably knew her, they probably knew the guy who was the murderer. And when the teacher's like, there's going to be a candlelight vigil before the game, they're like, oh, like, and it's like, because when something's happening all the time, you're just a bit like, we get it. Like, kids are dead, whatever. Like, it's just, it makes you so
there's
like
another serial killer.
yeah,
Fine.
so jaded. They're just like, as long as it doesn't affect us, who gives a shit? Like, and I love that this is like the mood of the town, because what can you do at that point? No one's expecting you to really survive. Like, it's not, you're just lucky if you're not a person who gets murdered.
To kind of start, now that you've only seen the first one, what do you make of the structure of what they're doing with Fear Street? The whole, like, 3 films across different eras. What we've seen so far has been mostly on 1994. And then the week after, so next week, after 1994, 1978 is released. And then the final installment will be set in 1666. Have I said that right? The final installment will be set in 1666.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds so weird coming up like that. But it's like, it's being built essentially as like both a film franchise that you're getting almost all at once.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the way they've set it out, because it'd be too much to shove into one film, obviously. It would just be like some long, drawn out thing that just didn't need to happen. They'd have to cut out so many nice things they have, or they're going to be able to do in 3 separate films. It means they can set the eras very specifically. They don't have to like skimp or like, I don't know, can all be very specific. I think if it was a series, it would fall into like Riverdale territory, which I enjoy, but may not always be the best. You know, it just gets a bit like hacky at that point. And yeah, I really like that this is the way they've spread it out and the way they've set it out. It just gives them so much space and cope. It's exciting to know there's going to be another film next week and then another one the week after. Because like I said, after the end of this first one, I really genuinely don't know. I know it's set in 1978. I know it's set at summer camp. I know there's going to be all those summer camp horrors. All the tropes from those are going to be involved in that, I'm sure. But in a way now I know that I'm not expecting. And in a way that I can't actually predict. Because we already know it's not going to be some like masked machete wielding or like chainsaw wielding killer. That's not what it's going to be. So it's somehow going to be these other ones, maybe the same ones, maybe different ones of these like witch invoked killers, who are doing it, who are there, who are like, so it's fascinating because I'm like, I actually don't know. And also, what other truth are they going to find out about the witch, about the situation? That will help them in their situation now. Like, so it's I have no clue. I know it's going to be 70s summer camp vibes, which I'm very excited about because that's always a good aesthetic.
I was about to ask you, like, what do you expect from Fear Street 1978?
I expect mean campers who from Sunnyvale. I expect just that very 70s camp vibe with American summer camps, which seem like teenagers are running this for some reason. Teenagers are in charge. Slightly older teenagers and the younger teenagers are just running these things. But they also treat the kids they don't like badly. And there's going to be lots of missed stuff. Lots of like teens doing it. Drugs as well. Again, unsupervised children, essentially. And then I'm sure there's going to be like, and then the night falls, and there are kids sneaking out of cabins and bunks, and people start dying. It takes everyone a really long time. There's going to be lots of, Chet, I know that's you. Like, that kind of like sneaking up. This is like a panty raid. I understand what's happening. And then it's not that. And then like Chet's body is like there on the floor and she's like, oh! Like it's going to be lots of stuff like that, I imagine. Lots of short shorts, and like tanned bodies and floppy hair. So it's just going to be lots of really good songs, I imagine, as well. But as far as like story goes, not a clue. Apart from like, yes, I'm sure the obvious tropes will be there, but I don't know how they're actually going to be presented to me. Or in what way. I don't know what killer's going to be there. I don't know how it's going to manifest. Very excited. Or what several killers are going to be there. I hope it's more than one again. I hope Axe Guy's back, if I'm being really honest. I really like the Axe Guy. I don't know. Even less so for the one afterwards. Literally no clue. I don't even have like a I'm not even like, here are the tropes. I'm like, who knows? I'm sure there'll be a witch. I'm sure the witch thing will be like.
I'm really excited for you to listen back to your predictions after you've seen the second one and see like do a little checklist of like tan bodies, floppy hair, lots of teenagers having sex, like unsupervised axemen, maybe. Who knows? I hope someone's called Chet or Brad. I'm sure there is. So I'll be like, you know what? Big cross against this film if no one's called Brad, because 100% there'd be a Brad in this situation. But yeah, I'm already excited. So excited for the other two. Pumped. I'm so pumped. I'm so excited for you to watch them. I really, really am. So Izora, thank you so much for watching this film, for talking about it with me. And where can people find more of your work online? Or where can they find you yelling at kids to get off your lawn?
Come to my porch to see me yelling at children. That's where I do that most Sundays. Otherwise, you can find my writing on the Final Girls website under the Bloody Women heading. I have a column every month called Bloody Perfect and a couple of other things I've written on there. You can also find me on a few episodes of the Final Girls podcast talking about other things, other films, other witches and genres and murderers and stuff I like. Yeah. And I put everything on Twitter. If you follow me at Izara_BB, you can find everything there.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. What a treat.
Let me know what you think of 1978.
I will. You know I will.
Thank you so much for listening. Do encourage you to check out Izora's work. It's all up on the Final Girls website, and follow her on Twitter at Izora_BB. And you can find me on Twitter at Anna B. Demented. I'll also link to a few pieces that we've got coming out about Fear Street, in case you want to deep dive a bit more into my thoughts on the trilogy. As always, please do rate, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your shows, as we're in a hiatus right now before we kickstart our next main series of the podcast. That type of stuff really, really does help people discover the show a bit more, and we just want to hear what you think. You can also support the Final Girls on Patreon, so find us there. As any good millennial podcast, of course, we have a Patreon, although these are weird times, so if you're not able to or not inclined to support us financially, that's absolutely fine. We will continue putting out episodes on the main feed for free. And we'll be back next Saturday with another deep dive into Fear Street 1978.